All right, welcome back to All Cars Y'all. I am John, and it is time for another Motorweek Retro review reaction. And this week, it is one of my most favorite cars, the 1994 Volkswagen Golf 3. I love the Golf. If you've been a fan of the channel for a long time, I talk about this every once in a while. I love the Golf. It's almost the perfect car for me, but I've never owned one. And I loved this version of the Golf. Just all around this time, I loved the Golf. And I'm excited to do this one. I'll give you some more thoughts as we go on. But as always, please grab a beverage of your choice. Sit back, get comfortable, and let's take a trip down memory lane.
Motorweek is made possible by Auto Value and Bumper to Bumper and TireRack.com.
Now from old cars, it's time to get back to new ones. More specifically, one of the newest cars from Volkswagen, the Golf 3. After some rough years, VW is counting on the latest Golf and its close relative, the Jetta 3, to revive the company's flagging U.S. sales. But the question is the Golf 3 good enough to get Volkswagen back in the game?
Well, and let's address that right there. No. The answer was no. Back at this time, I really liked Volkswagen. So kind of give you some timeline framing here. I had American cars, had co-opted, lived somewhere else with people who were VW fans. So when my last Buick started to have transmission issues again, I started looking for a used car, and I started looking foreign. But I still wasn't sold on the Japanese cars, the Asian cars. And I focused in on Volkswagen. And the more I looked, I could not swing, say a Jetta or a Golf. So I ended up with my Fox, which was fantastic. I loved my Fox. But I became a big VW fan because of it. And honestly, the problem with VW was, and I've said this many times in many different videos in different ways, especially the Jetta, was the size of a Civic for the price of an Accord. And that was the overall problem with Volkswagen. They were, I thought, good looking. The interiors were good, but they were priced wrong. And then you add to this the Golf, that I have repeated many times, Americans don't like hatchbacks. And people always throw back at me like, what about the CR-V? Well, Americans love hatchbacks when they're an SUV. But as a car, we don't like them. You have to make it a fastback. You have to do something else. But just a hatchback, it says cheap to us, regardless of how good it is or the interior quality or how well it rides, the luxury accoutrements that are added. Hatchback says cheap to Americans. But I'm one of those, I loved the Golf. And if you drive one and you use one and you flip the seats around, it's, gosh darn, it's just about perfect in my opinion. That's how much I love it. So, there we're framing it for you.
This third-generation VW Golf is already a winner overseas. Since its introduction at the Frankfurt Motor Show just 2 years ago, it's become the world's best-selling car. Unfortunately for Volkswagen dealers in the U.S., none of those sales happened here. But now Golf 3s are available, and we think that's good news for American buyers desiring a small car that drives like a very substantial German sports sedan. The Golf's winning ways start with a more rounded look to its traditional two-box shape, which results in a low .32 coefficient of drag.
And you know what? That's the thing, that if you appreciate a Golf, you can appreciate it. If you appreciate Volkswagen, you can appreciate the Golf. Stylistically, I have mixed feelings about the front of it with the headlights, how they curve in at the grille. On the one hand, I don't love it. It's not teardropped, it's not square, it's not rectangular, it's not trapezoidal. But if you take the front of the Golf and do anything else with it, they came up with just about the perfect solution to not be overly square, to not look like a Renault or something like that. Down the side, pretty flush glass, and at the back, I don't want to overstate it too much, perfection. Good-sized headlights, just a tiny bit of style, a little square, a little rounded, giving you the biggest opening possible back there. If nothing else, maybe they could have stretched down a little bit further, but that might have looked oversized. And just fantastic. Honestly, I just adore this generation of Golf. Now, I happen to like the one before and after and other ones, but this one, I think it's because of where I was in my life. This one absolutely spoke to me. I regret not owning one, honestly.
There's noticeable improvement under the hood, too, where the base engine is now a 2-liter single overhead cam 4-cylinder. It develops 115 horsepower and 122 pound-feet of torque thanks to sequential multi-port fuel injection and a high 10-to-1 compression ratio. Yet it still uses regular fuel. Potent VR6 power arrives in the GTI next spring.
And you know what? This engine, I have mixed feelings on the engine overall. Not being a mechanic, I tend to think pretty highly of it. And primarily that's because VW kept it forever. And while you had the Japanese manufacturers adding dual cams and every VTEC and everything else, this same 115 horsepower just seemed to trudge along. And you know what? I kind of respect that. I thought it was a very flexible engine. Not as high revving, not as smooth, not as anything. You could always find something else that did something better. But I thought it was a very well-rounded engine, and I personally have a high opinion of its reliability as well. I'll stop there.
Meanwhile, our Golf 3 GL came with a 5-speed manual transmission, one of the better shifting VW units we've tried. A 4-speed automatic is available. The 5-speed will move the 2,577-pound Golf from 0 to 60 in 10 seconds flat, though our drivers felt as if they were moving even faster. Handling exercises presented no surprises. Our test drivers praised the light, accurate steering with just the right amount of predictable oversteer. And like every other small VW we've tested in recent years, the Golf 3 lifted its inside rear wheel while negotiating our slalom course. Yet it never causes concern, not even in a high-speed lane change, where we also found a good bit of body roll.
Okay. I'm slightly less favorable there. Number one, 10 seconds, okay. Not great, but this is the single overhead cam engine. It doesn't have a lot of power. I guess it's fine. And I think it was very critical. They said it feels faster than it is. And I want to bring back a story to you real quick that I had a buddy back in high school that bought a Geo Tracker, okay? And that thing didn't have a lot of power, and it wasn't fast. But it felt like an MG. It was so sprightly. It was surprising, honestly. And that's kind of how I've always felt about this Golf, or the Golfs around this time, right? That you're not winning a race, and other people could come out and be like, yeah, I can beat you. And even the simple fact that the Golf or Volkswagen had to do what the Americans did, which was come out with a V6 to beat the Japanese at their own game in terms of the more sporty versions, right? But there's something to be said for an engine that doesn't make a lot of horsepower, that doesn't accelerate incredibly fast, but feels fun. That was Farfignugan. The joy of driving. That's what this boiled down to. Now, in terms of the slalom, you know what? It looked okay. A lot of body roll. They of course talked about the inside rear wheel lifting up a little bit. They say you don't really notice it, but when you watch this, their drivers who have experience at it, there's a lot of body shift back and forth. Not quite as secure, stable, and no drama as I honestly would have expected, but doesn't turn me off. But watching a lot of these retro reviews, that one didn't look quite as smooth as I thought it was going to.
Our test car was one of the few 93 Mexican-built Golfs to enter the U.S., and thus it didn't have anti-lock brakes, which are optional on 94 models. They would cure our car's tendency to lock up under heavy braking. This Golf stopped from 60 in a fairly long average distance of 138 feet.
Not great. Not utterly horrible. I wouldn't buy it because it's so bad, but not great. When you've got cars doing 115, 120, 125, 138, that's an entire car length of additional stopping. That's kind of surprising. You would think even with ABS that would stop better. And I'd be curious to know what the ABS equipped version would have. But the way it it feels like they were trying to modulate the pedal themselves instead of just leaning into it. I wonder if that didn't have a little bit of an impact on it, but maybe it got squirrely. So, a little slightly disappointing, guys.
Other numbers that Golf buyers will like better are the 24 city, 32 highway EPA mileage estimates. Our very mixed test loop returned 28 miles per gallon. The Golf 3 GL has an attractively bright cloth interior and will include standard dual airbags on cars built after October. Gauges are typical VW, large and clear, but lacking oil pressure and volts. The front bucket seats have a variety of manual adjustments, including height, and they all work well. These are 2 of the 7 beverage holders VW proudly claims for the new Golf. The roomy rear seat folds forward and down, and when combined with the hatchback's trunk, forms a giant 41 cubic feet of cargo space, more than some small station wagons. 1994.
Whoa. They kind of skimmed over the interior there. Generally speaking, I really like it. I want to be consistent as I do these as much as I can, and that I like light and bright interiors. There's a lot of black here, but they focused it on these vertical surfaces, and everything else got a lighter tone to it, giving the car a more open and airy feel. Gauges are clear. I wish they'd shown more of the center stack right there and how it was laid out. I remember always loving it and always thinking it was very easy to use, very ergonomically well done. Backseat always had pretty good room. I wish they'd shown what people actually fit into it. But being able to fold down the rear seat, increase your cargo space, turn this into a little station wagon. This has good space, not fantastic, but good space behind the rear seat. Lay it down, you've got a microvan, honestly. This is a really well done version of the Golf platform, in my opinion.
For Golf 3 GL prices start at $11,900. With ABS, a deluxe stereo, power sunroof, and air conditioning, the tab comes to $14,335. Not bad when you consider $16,000 Civics and Corollas are commonplace. So we came away pleased, if almost tired of waiting, for the Volkswagen Golf 3. We know there are millions of loyal VW fans, not to mention hundreds of dealers that have also waited. For them, the new Golf will be a winning addition to the VW brand, and we think well worth their patience.
That was super short. I expected more, honestly, for a brand new vehicle and one is influential in the world. I thought they'd spend a little more time on it, showing the interior and the back seat and just everything about it. That price, as equipped, $14,000. Let's consider that a base. What I've got in my mind is a couple of years later, a year or 2 years later, a base Saturn SL, not even the SL1. So this is only a manual, stripped down version, was about $12,000 and some change. An SL, which would be largely equivalent to this, was about $14,000. So it sounds pretty fair, except this is before 2 years of Volkswagen price increases. And it's a hatchback. And a vast majority of buyers wanted a sedan style, not a hatchback style. And in 95, my first wife and I bought a Dodge Neon. And I don't remember how much we paid for it, but I want to say it was 12-ish and some change. So this was at least a couple of $1,000s more than a Neon at the time. Now, I am not saying that Neon was more reliable or even quieter or even better to drive than the Volkswagen, but it was a couple $1,000s less when you're comparing interior space and actually, have someone in your life that doesn't want a hatchback. It was a no-brainer. This came off the list. Even if that price sounds kind of familiar, it came off the list for a lot of people simply because of the hatchback. That's why they offered the Jetta. And ultimately, that's why VW canceled the Golf and left us with only the GTI. I love this car. I absolutely love this car, and there is a gigantic regret in my life that when I had an opportunity, when it was there, I didn't buy it because the car wasn't for me, honestly. And every generation of Golf afterwards, I've been right there, and I've just made the decision to not get one primarily because of price. Sometimes because of reliability concerns, but mostly because of price. And now it's not here in the market. And gosh, that breaks my heart. But as I look back in my life and I look back at where I was at this time period, I was a VW fan and the Golf came out and I drove it. I drove the Jetta and I absolutely loved it. I loved every single thing about it except for the price. And I definitely regret never having one, this or later generations. If it was still on the market, I would seriously consider one right now, especially as I do a video like this where I'm like, yeah, I want one. But you know what? If it came down to, here's my money, and I want to walk into a dealership and buy something, would it be the Golf? I don't know. Other than nostalgia, I don't know. So, cool trip down memory lane. If you had one and it was good or it was bad, your opinions of the engine or the interior, whatever, let me know. But at this point in my life, when this was new, I would have bought this way before I bought a Corolla or a Civic. As I got older and I began to appreciate the Japanese manufacturers more, well, this might be good, but is it Civic good? Thanks for being here, guys. Appreciate it.